This is Generations Kevin Swanson with you, and the U.S. Supreme Court has just issued what is probably the worst decision since Roe v. Wade of 1973. What is that, 53 years ago? Well, the High Court halted the enforcement of the 5th District Court's decision, which would have stopped the kill pill by mail program, the abortion pill, shipped across state lines. Shame on Justice Roberts. Shame on Justice Gorsuch. And shame on Justice Barrett and Justice Kavanaugh. Shame, shame, shame. The blood of millions of children is on their hands today. Now, here's what happened. By a 7-2 vote, the court granted an emergency appeal from abortion pill manufacturers to allow the shipping of abortion by mail without an in-person doctor visit. Now, this is the stuff of which civil wars are made. And I'm going to make that point in just a moment. Though this will not be the final decision on the matter, the decision here today will live on in infamy. There were only 2 dissents, Justice Thomas and Justice Alito. And when push comes to shove, here's what happens. When the moment of testing happens, every one of the Trump appointees turned out to be a total disappointment. They buckled. They proved to give up the core battle that could have saved our nation. Justice Thomas wrote in his dissent on this decision, applicants for the court issue are manufacturers and distributors of mifepristone, a drug that is primarily designed to cause abortion. They complain that the Fifth Circuit's order would have reduced profits that they would have derived from selling mifepristone, that is the kill pill. Now again, Thomas, I would deny their applications because they have not satisfied their burden for securing interim relief. I write separately to note that as Louisiana argued below, it is a criminal offense to ship mifepristone for use in abortions. The Comstock Act bans using the mails to ship any drug for producing abortion. Justice Alito also wrote a dissent stating that the court's unreasoned order granting stays in this case is remarkable. He says, what is at stake is the perpetration of a scheme to undermine our decision in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization in 2022, which restored the right of each state to decide how to regulate abortion within its borders. Some states responded to Dobbs by making it even easier to obtain an abortion than it was before, and that's their prerogative. Other states, including Louisiana, made abortion illegal, except in narrow circumstances. But Louisiana's efforts have been thwarted by certain medical providers, private organizations, and states that abhor laws like Louisiana's and seek to undermine their enforcement. These medical providers and private organizations have developed an operation enabling women in Louisiana and other states that restrict abortions to place an online order for a pill called mifepristone that induces abortion. Exactly. One might think that Louisiana could stop or impede this out-of-state interference in its law enforcement by bringing civil actions or criminal charges against the participants in the scheme. But states have effectively blocked those efforts by enacting so-called shield laws, which prevent Louisiana from visiting any adverse legal consequences on the perpetrators. As a result, more abortions now occur each month in Louisiana than they did before Dobbs. Exactly. Folks, Justices Roberts, Kavanaugh, and Gorsuch, they knew what they were doing when they reversed Roe v. Wade. They knew that the preferred method of abortion had shifted from surgical to the kill pill. They knew the pill could be made accessible across state lines, and the whole reversal Roe v. Wade would be a moot point. They knew Louisiana could ban abortions, while the abortion rate would all the while increase through the shipping of the pill across state lines. They knew it. The monthly average number of abortions in America have steadily increased from 79,620 monthly abortions in 2022, prior to the reversal of Roe v. Wade, to 88,180 abortions in 2023, to 95,250 abortions in 2024, to 98,630 abortions in 2025. That's a 19.3% increase since the reversal of Roe v. Wade, thanks mainly to the kill pill by mail program. Abortion rates are higher than ever in the history of this nation, largely due to the advanced technology of the IUD, the day after pill, and the kill pill by mail program. Now, friends, this is what matters to God, much more so than whether we're shutting down immigration and killing drug smugglers in the Caribbean. I mean, come on. The hypocrisy of the conservative right is utterly sickening. Americans who believe abortion should be legal in most or all cases have actually increased radically since 2019, from 54% to 63%. That's an unprecedented 9% increase. 63% of American women call themselves pro-abortion, up from 45% in 2012. Still about 45% of men call themselves pro-abortion. That's held steady for about 15 years. But the worst part of all of this is the silence on the part of the church when it comes to these abortifacients, the silence on the part of conservative news agencies, the silence on the part of the Trump conservatives. Where is the outrage from the conservative Christian media on this one, on the decision that just happened last week? Who's saying anything? The silence is deafening. By and large, the rise in abortion in America is no big deal to these people. They don't care. They don't care. The abortion issue carries no more traction for the conservatives in most of the states, certainly for the federal government. But let me tell you this, God cares. Be sure of this. There is a God in the heavens who cares about each one of these little babies created in his image in the womb of these women. The federal abortion ban language was stripped from the National Republican platform at Donald Trump's insistence. And the language now enthusiastically supports IVF and abortifacient conception control. To be sure that the Republican Party remains the abortion light party. Now, okay, back into history. We tried this with slavery back in the 19th century. The Compromise of 1850 was all about letting the states decide the slavery issue. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 did the same thing. Occasionally, slave traders would kidnap a free man from a free state. For example, a man by the name of Solomon Northrop, he was a free black man from New York, who was kidnapped in Washington, D.C. in 1841, sold into slavery. He remained enslaved in Louisiana for 12 years before regaining his freedom. Many northern states passed personal liberty laws to try to protect free black residents and alleged fugitives, but these laws sometimes required jury trials, forbade state officials from helping slave catchers, or protected free blacks from abduction. And no thanks to the federal government, the Supreme Court, they treated these state protections as interference with federal fugitive slave enforcement. At the end of the day, friends, free states had very little power to insist on freedom for slaves brought into their states, as in the case of the Dred Scott decision of 1857. And that's what precipitated the Civil War. Okay, here we are again. The federal government wants to, quote, let the states decide on abortion, on killing babies. But they'll let the pro-abortion states send assassins across state lines into pro-life states to kill off the babies there. Here's my question. Would the federal government allow bounty hunters to kill off escaped slaves in free states? You know, just like murder them. Would that be okay? This is a big deal. I mean, what we're dealing with is a bigger deal than what they were dealing with in the 19th century. I think we're coming to the end of pro-life America. We may have a pro-life Alabama, we may have a pro-life Tennessee, we may have a pro-life Louisiana, but this U.S. Supreme Court decision marks the beginning of the end of pro-life America. I mean, do you really think Alabama and Louisiana are going to go to war over abortion? I mean, it's ironic that these were the slave states 150 years ago. Now they're the pro-life states. But 5 pro-life states is what I figure. We got about 5 pro-life states. You think they're going to go to war against 45 pro-abortion states in America? They can't win that. I ran for governor of Colorado on a pro-life plank in 1994, cultivated about 4% of the vote. Now, I noticed that the Republican candidates for governor in Colorado this year have almost nothing to say about the abortion issue on their websites. Perhaps they know that if they put that on their website, they'd be back down to 4% of the vote. The nation is ruined until this nation repents. Now, I want to do a full history on abortion in America on this segment. And where do we go from here? Bill Jack from Worldview Academy is with me now in Generations to talk this one through. Bill, I'll tell you what, we got to know the history on this, especially in the United States. It's one reason why I like the new book that came out from Marvin Olasky on the history of abortion in America. Let me give you a brief synopsis of it as best as I can in just a few minutes, because I want to talk about where we've been, where we are, and where we're going on this issue. I do believe we are right there right there. I mean, either we're facing the judgment of Almighty God upon the whole nation or civil war. I think it's one or the other.
Well, I agree that the Dobbs decision was an attempt to keep the Supreme Court out of it. And just as the Dred Scott decision was.
Yeah.
And it's not possible.
It's not going to fix it. That's not going to fix it.
Pro-slavery states and free states. You cannot have pro-killing baby states and pro-life states. They cannot exist together.
We can't be one nation under God.
We cannot be one nation under God.
No way.
So, but you're right. It's because of the 50 years of indoctrination by the abortion industry that our people have been trained to think that it is a right to kill babies. And so, civil war? No, probably not.
The only other option, as I see at this point, is the judgment of God upon the entire nation.
I agree.
I can't think there's much hope for the nation. Of course, repentance. We talk about repentance, but that's got to start in the churches, and we're just not seeing that. Okay, so the first recorded abortion in America when it came into trial was 1652 in Maryland. Catholic Maryland was the first to bring abortion into the colonies. They actually had 3 cases. Maryland had 3 recorded cases of abortion between 1652 and 1662. The Protestant world, that is further north, Virginia, and then up into Massachusetts, they were absolutely dead opposed to any kind of abortion. It was considered the most egregious sin, one of the most egregious sins that anybody could ever have committed, especially when a mother would capitulate to it. Now, in most of these early cases, it wasn't the mother. The mother was forced to drink some sort of poison on the part of her boyfriend. So the boyfriend is typically the one who was brought to trial. It actually wasn't the woman who was brought to trial for the first 100 years of American history. It was the men who were brought to trial because they forced the abortion upon the woman, like bringing her mouth open and forcing some abortifacient down her throat. So those men were brought to trial, and we see that in Maryland first. Now, the Protestant world of Cotton Mather actually applied the same text that we apply, Exodus 22:22-23. That is, if a woman is, accidentally, and she didn't do it herself, but accidentally she gives birth because of the negligent act on the part of others. As in somebody is having a fight and then the woman is somehow accidentally affected as, somebody who was collateral damage in the fight. If she wound up with an abortion, the men would be prosecuted according to the law, the Lex Talionis law of Exodus 22:22-23. So again, Exodus 22 is the law that establishes the illegality of killing babies in the womb. Without it, you don't have it. Interestingly, in the 1970s, Jesse Helms and Senator Bob Packwood engaged in a debate over this very thing. Pro-abortion Packwood from Oregon complained that there's a growing Cotton Mather mentality in the nation. Helms replied, because Cotton Mather brought the Lex Talionis law to bear, and that was the law that effectively governed the American conscience until 1973. But Jesse Helms replied to Senator Packwood, if there's a Cotton Mather mentality, so be it. There is a set of instructions that came down from Mount Sinai about all of that. So that was Helms' response to Packwood in the abortion debate of the 1970s. Now, Massachusetts had a single case of abortion in 50 years between, say, about 1650 and 1700. So there was 1, maybe 2 cases of abortion that are recorded in Massachusetts in the early founding of the nation. First report in a newspaper on an abortion came in Catholic Maryland again in 1752. Where a man forced a woman to have an abortion and then escaped the colony. He was brought to trial, or he was attempted to bring to trial, but he managed to escape the colony and wound up somewhere else. A Connecticut woman, Sarah Grosvenor, 19 years of age, took an abortifacient in 1742 and died. For centuries, women would attempt an abortion if a man promised to marry her and then took off and abandoned her. So that was the typical context where a woman would attempt an abortion. In the 1700s, a French Huguenot writer on jurisprudence, Montesquieu, actually did bring in the cruel practice of abortion into some of his stuff. Connecticut had one of its very first abortions with a Yale seminary graduate in 1820. This made the newspapers. He was arrested. The newspaper reported about the abortion, quote, the county has never witnessed a trial in which so much baseness and cold calculating depravity of heart was disclosed and where so black a deed was ever attempted. The young man was convicted of forcing the woman to an abortifacient. He served 2 years in prison and then became a pro-abortion advocate in New York City in the 1830s and 1840s. Now, it's interesting. We live in a day in which there are 15 million abortions per year in this country, minimum. 65% of viable babies are killed using the kill pill by mail program, the IUD, the day after pill, et cetera, not even counting whatever the abortifacient effects come by the use of the birth control pill, where there's a little bit more controversy. So if you include that, it would probably be upwards of 75 to 85% of viable babies that are conceived in this country are killed off by abortion. So we find one abortion reported in 1820, 2 reports of abortions occurring over a period of, say, 100 years of American history, with so much baseness and depravity of heart involved. Now, today, that's 65% of babies. Millions upon millions of babies are killed by the coldest of hearts in a society that is dead cold. The love of many now has grown way cold. Think about 1 in 100 years. Now it's 15 million every single year. The heart of so many people, so many parents, our entire society is dead cold. It feels like we're very close to the end of the world, the final judgment at the hands of Almighty God. The first abortion law appeared in Pennsylvania in 1829. The first pro-life activist was one John McDowell, who also was a Yale graduate. It's interesting that the first pro-lifer, and he walked about the streets of New York in black. He was at one point he identified, and he complained about a member of a Christian church procuring an abortion. Just shocked that he actually found a member of a Christian church in New York City in the 1830s and 1840s who had procured an abortifacient. And he was shocked that that was the case in the 1830s and 1840s. But John McDowell was the first pro-life activist, walked about the streets of New York in black and protested the rise of abortion in New York City. Of course, then you get Madame Ristel, comes over from France and becomes the most famous abortionist in America during the 1860s and 1870s. She eventually, they attempt to arrest her, but before they can arrest her, she's found committed suicide in a pool of blood in her bathtub. So that's the history of abortion in America. Anti-abortion, or excuse me, the Comstock Act of 1873 was a very important act. And of course, this is what was brought up by Justice Thomas in his argument. The Biden Justice Department issued a legal memo in, I believe it was 2022, saying that Comstock did not prohibit the lawful mailing of abortion drugs. And I think the Trump administration has maintained the same position to this day. Nevertheless, the Comstock Act of 1873 required that every obscene, lewd, lascivious, indecent, filthy, or vile article, matter, thing, device, or substance, and every article or thing designed, adapted, or intended for producing abortion or for any indecent or immoral use may not be sent through the U.S. mail. That would be, quote, against the law, according to the Comstock Act of 1873, U.S. Code 18, Chapter 71, U.S. Code, and paragraph 1461, which, by the way, I just simply blocked and copied off of the Federal Register. So there it is, my friends. That's the history of abortion in America until 1967, when abortion was legalized in Colorado first, and then in the state of California, signed off by Governor Ronald Reagan. And then 1973, we get the Roe v. Wade decision. So, friends, that's it. For at least 100 years, the Comstock Act was somewhat effective in stemming the tide of abortion in America until 1967, and then again 1973, where it was legalized in all 50 states by this U.S. Supreme Court. And I think at this point, we're seeing the U.S. Supreme Court is legalizing abortion on the federal level, allowing the federal mail system to approve of the sending of abortion pills across state lines. Effectively, the federal legal system is enabling abortion in all 50 states by way of the kill pill by mail program. And by the way, that's the kill pill is the dominant means by which abortion occurs in America today. 60% of abortions are committed by the kill pill, and therefore the kill pill by mail program being allowed for by the U.S. Supreme Court is de facto legalizing abortion in all 50 states one more time.
Isn't it ironic that, as you pointed out earlier in your commentary, that the states that are the most pro-life states and claiming states' rights in this based on Dobbs, that they can prohibit abortion within their borders, were the same states that were claiming that same right, states' rights, in protecting the evil of slavery. How history has reversed itself in our country.
Yeah.
And
the Supreme Court of the United States maintains the same perspective.
Of
adopting and embracing every form of evil.
Right.
At the highest echelons of government. Now, here's my perspective, is I believe they are dominated by principalities and powers. So these guys are not true Christians. I'm just saying it. They don't have the faith to stand against the most egregious evil of the day. And for that reason, I have to say that they're capitulating. They're bowing to the powers, the demonic powers that would continue to bring about this abortion plague to this nation.
And Anthony Comstock, for whom the Comstock Act is named, was a devout Protestant. He was appalled by the sexual permissiveness he witnessed in New York City. Right. He became postmaster under U.S. Grant, and for the next 40 years, he got Congress to pass this law, and then he began to prosecute and
pornographers as well as abortionists, right? Yep. Both.
And one Christian can make a difference,
big time.
So
for get this, 140 years.
Exactly.
They're still debating Anthony Comstock's impact,
right,
and his legislation.
And he's been vilified
140 years later. Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's been called a prude. He's been vilified from the inception of this Comstock Act, even until today.
He may be the one reason why God has withheld judgment from the nation over a period of 140 years. Of course, that's off the table now because of this action taken by the U.S. Supreme Court. Shame on the U.S. Supreme Court. Shame on the appointees that came out of the Trump administrations.
Right. Comstock had already made a name for himself in New York as a leader of the YMCA's Committee for the Suppression of Vice. The YMCA stood up against vice. Again, Christians need to stand. Churches need to stand. Pastors need to begin to educate their congregants on the evils of abortion and begin to urge them to stand and speak. And there may be another Comstock that is raised up.
There's something that's irritating me a little bit, Bill, and I want you to speak to this because I know you're connected with the gubernatorial race in the state of Colorado. I ran for governor, as I said, in 1994, unashamedly, unabashedly standing for the pro-life issue because, honestly, I believe it's the one thing that's bringing, or will bring, actually, it's not just that, but it's the homosexual thing as well. But these are the two things that seem to invite the judgment of God upon nations. And so, priority-wise, we need to be addressing these issues. We have to be putting this on the websites. We need to put this on our platform. And yet Scott Bottoms and Victor Marx, I have not seen this as part of their priority agenda as they run for the high office here in the state of Colorado. That concerns me. Now, Scott Bottoms most definitely has attempted pro-life legislation. Scott Bottoms has stood up and spoken at the well down here at the Colorado legislature in favor of the pro-life position. There's no question about that.
He's run a bill every year.
But why won't Scott Bottoms and Victor Marx run on a pro-life platform? What's going on with this?
Both men have claimed and positioned themselves as being pro-life, and that life begins at conception. I would say earlier.
You know why I think it's not on the website? Here's my position or my thought. It's because Colorado is 96% pro-abortion.
It is 96%.
The people are the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
I don't know how we're going to reverse the heart of the nation. But I think these politicians realize, they realize those issues don't hold traction. The vast majority of voters in the state of Colorado would not vote for Kevin Swanson because he's pro-life. And they will not vote for Scott Bottoms or Victor Marks because they're pro-life. They're going to vote for them because they oppose immigration or because fill in the blank. They're a little bit better on fiscal responsibility. That's my view. These politicians are going to have to cultivate votes not based on the pro-life position, but based on everything else because of the heart of the voters.
We voted as a people, as you pointed out. We're 96% probably pro-choice, pro-death. We are a culture in Colorado that loves death. And so it is now embedded in our Constitution as a constitutional right. And that we as a state will pay for abortion. Your tax money, my tax money goes to pay for abortions for women. We pay to kill babies in this state. Not just in this state. We invite people to come. We are an abortion destination state. So as governor, no matter how pro-life you are still ruling a state that has a constitution that has embedded in it the right to kill babies. Now, what you can do as governor then is you can find ways to limit tax money going that way. You can find ways to draw it back, but you cannot do away with abortion as a right because it's constitutional.
So where do we go as a nation at this point? And I guess the obvious thing is if the hearts of the people are so depraved, the only possibility is if the church stands up and preaches.
Right.
And the church, I think, takes a stand against the use of abortifacients conception control.
Government is not the answer.
Yeah.
It is an agent of God's will, but it's not the answer. Government just restrains evil, or should. It's the church that changes hearts by proclaiming the gospel.
In terms of our strategy, then I would say 96% of our efforts probably need to be focused on the grassroots, the church, as well as media efforts like ours, in which we're speaking to the hearts of the people. We speak to the hearts of tens of thousands of families that listen to this program, and we just say, hey, don't kill your children. Don't use abortifacients that could risk the lives of unborn children. Please, I plead with you, don't do this. And I think every denomination in America needs to approve of a resolution that warns congregants, all of their congregants in the Southern Baptist Church and the PC as well, the use of abortifacients in the IUD, which kills. The IUD kills on average 0.8 of a child per year. For every woman on it, which calculates up to about 14 to 16 million babies slaughtered by the use of the IUD in any given year. That being the case, until the churches stand up, until we put efforts into reviving and reforming the churches on issues like the use of abortifacients in birth control, I don't think we got a shot at changing anything in politics. So, yes, I think we should still apply ourselves to politics. Okay, do everything you can possibly do as a governor, as a senator, as a president of the United States to strip this thing back and appoint, principled justices to the U.S. Supreme Court. I hope somebody does that. People who have a true faith who can stand up against the powers of darkness, because I believe it is a massive spiritual war when it comes to what's happening in Washington, D.C. But we got to find true Christians, real Christians, strong Christians who can stand against these forces of darkness. And perhaps, just perhaps, when it comes to the most crucial decisions you'll ever make in your career, you'll take the right position and set this nation on a good direction. I think Comstock's one of the best examples of anybody who, think about a guy who stood up against the forces of darkness and affected a nation to this day.
Yeah.
Where
as Postmaster General.
As Postmaster General, he encouraged a particular law, and the U.S. Supreme Court is still quoting that law to this day.
And that's why elections matter. That's why who you choose for governor matters.
Yep.
That's why you have to drill down on what their policies are.
All right, friends, as we wrap up this program, I think we need to be educated on this thing, and that's why it's important to understand the context of this great battle against abortion, which, by the way, I bring into our course for homeschooling called America in God's Providence. I recommend it for the whole family. It's a great read aloud. It's about 1,000 pages, but a decent font and beautiful 4-color pictures all the way through it. But we trace these major issues that have really eroded the heart, the morality, the direction of our nation over a period of 150 to 200 years. We walk through this in my book that I produce called American God's Providence, certainly applicable, certainly relevant on this 250th anniversary of American history. So I'd recommend American God's Providence. I don't just deal with politics. I deal with culture, these major hot button issues that have defined or undermined the nation over a period of, say, 150 years. I've got a pretty good segment on Comstock in America in God's Providence. Get the full story of how God has worked in actions of mercy as well as judgment through the years. It could be God's bringing his judgment down upon the nation again. We're about due for it. But he's also a God of mercy, and we can cry out for his mercy as we humble ourselves and recognize that the direction of the nation, the effects that come upon this nation is really in the hands of God. So let's be sure we educate our children on these issues, and I'd recommend American God's Providence as a resource that could be helpful for you. This is Kevin Swanson and Bill Jack inviting you back again next time as we continue to lay down a vision for the next generation. This has been a production of the Generations Media Network. For more information, go to generations.org/media.